welcome Amanda and take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. So my name is Amanda Thompson. I'm a peer recovery supervisor with Maine Behavioral Healthcare. I am also a mom of two and a person in recovery. So in my role at MBH, I support a team of recovery coaches who respond to referrals from 8 different Maine health emergency departments. We also have folks who work in substance use treatment offices that we call hubs and primary care offices that we call spokes. Part of my role also is to provide support for individuals who have been referred through Midcoast Hospital's emergency department. So we're going to take a few minutes today to talk about peer recovery support or recovery coaching and what it means to be in partnership with people in recovery. Next slide, please. So I think it makes sense to talk about what is recovery when we talk about how do we support people in recovery. And so there's a couple of different definitions here. So SAMHSA defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And we also use the definition that CCAR provides. CCAR is where our training curriculum comes from. And so CCAR says that people are in recovery when they say they are. So this means that when we're supporting folks, it doesn't always look like abstinence-based support. We also support people in moderation or in harm reduction. A multiple pathway approach is really embraced through this role, and the support looks very individualized. Next slide, please. So what is peer recovery support? You probably hear recovery coaching or peer support. So those are kind of all interchangeable today as I explain things. So people have a unique capacity to support each other based on their shared experiences. And this happens organically in our lives, whether we're aware of it or not. So if you think about if you are looking for a kitchen appliance on Amazon, if you are a large family, you are looking for reviews that are based on other people using that appliance in their large family. So that shared experience becomes a place of trusted and valued input. And so when your lived experience is struggling with substances and being in recovery, and you offer up that lived experience to support other people, we might call you a recovery coach. And so CCAR says that a recovery coach is anyone interested in promoting recovery by removing barriers and obstacles to recovery, and by serving as a personal guide and mentor for people seeking or in recovery. So this happens in a lot of different spaces all around the country. It's cool to see an international movement of peer support around recovery as well. And so in some spaces, they see this role being very reciprocal. So peer recovery support is the process of giving and receiving non-clinical assistance that aids the process of recovery. And so at MBH, peer recovery support is provided by individuals who have lived experience in recovery. And for MaineMom referrals, this also includes being a mom in recovery. Next slide. So relationships are really key in recovery. They're really a foundational place where we find support. And in relationship with people, connection creates belonging. And it really says we are in this together. And so just knowing that you are not alone in this process is extremely impactful for people. And so that helps to build the trust that we need to try new things and make big changes in our lives. Just to know that we have somebody with us while we face difficulty makes it easier to take risks in trying things that maybe seem really scary and we're very afraid of. And so we also work to create a vision of a life worth moving towards, away from fear, judgment, and stigma towards things that feel hopeful and possible. Relationships that are judgment-free when it comes to substance use are hugely supportive. I have so many people that I work with that say putting down substances is one thing, but facing the shame and judgment of their past is a totally different thing. So that support is really unique in that way. And so we get the opportunity to challenge the things that we've learned in past relationships and offer opportunity to grow and heal through new ones. These relationships become a safe practice ground to really try new ways of relating. And so we work to build community where support is readily available and accessible to anyone that desires it. Next slide. So partnership is a huge part of these relationships. Again, we're really saying like, we are in this together. And so these support relationships are voluntary. They can start and stop at any time. It really is self-directed. And so this supports choice in substance use treatment. These relationships are mutual and reciprocal. So we're both giving and receiving support. And so this is like important for people who are in this role too, because it's nice to be in a role where we can show up as whole people. So even when we're struggling, even when we're having a bad day, it's still valuable for us to be present with another person. And when I'm having a hard time, the folks who I work with are able to be supportive in my struggle. And again, like that creates value and connection and says like, you have something to offer me. So we work to share power in these relationships too. And so we work to reduce a power differential. And one of the ways that we do that is by being mindful of staying in our role or staying in our lane. And so we're careful not to act in a way that is like a case manager or as a counselor. And we hold the value that our paths are self-directed and that neither one of us shows up to the relationship as the fixer, right? Because that reinforces the power differential of like, you have a problem and I have the solution. And so we work to avoid that. This is strengths-based support. So we're not treating each other as fragile or bad or broken. We believe that we are the experts of our own experience and that we have within us things that we can draw from to initiate and sustain our recovery. It is really cool to see people like figure stuff out for themselves and say, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what resonates with me. So we work to stay person-centered also. And the focus is on the whole person. And so not a specific problem or a specific diagnosis. So we're careful about the language that we use to keep that person-centered also. And then going back to that definition that CCAR provides us on what is recovery, that you are in recovery when you say you are, helps to stay person-centered. And so we show up in these relationships transparent and honest. So we use plain language when we talk to each other. And we take accountability for the feelings that come up in that relationship and speak to what is happening for us. And so if there's conflict in the relationship, we talk about that. And again, we use it as that safe practice ground to try on new ways of relating with people. Next slide. So what kind of support is offered? What does this look like in action? So we spend a lot of time offering emotional support for people, a lot of time in conversation, a lot of time working on connection and providing validation. And so we do that through active listening, extending empathy and compassion for folks, really creating that space of deep understanding. And so we're curious about the untold story. How did you learn the things that you learned? How do you see the world? And how does that affect the choices that you make or the behavior that you have? We also offer informational support. So providing information to health and wellness services, information about community supports and services. We know these systems of care, and we know how to navigate them. And so it's really cool to be able to provide information that helps people feel more secure in trying things and reducing the anxiety that we experience, like just trying stuff that we haven't tried before, trying things that we feel like we failed in before. We also kind of have like these insider tips to things. So if I'm supporting someone who says to me, I'm interested in going to 12-step meetings, but I'm really, really afraid of speaking up in the meeting, I can provide the information of, well, don't sit in the chair that has the printed copy of how it works then, because they will ask you to share that. And so the more pieces of information that someone has, that anxiety really does come down and become a little bit more manageable. So we offer tangible support too, physical presence and accompaniment in accomplishing tasks. And so if we're working with someone who is a MaineMom referral, for example, that might look like going to the grocery store with her for the first time that she uses WIC checks. WIC checks are a pain in the butt. You've got to separate all of these different orders. You've got to look for products with specific like weights or amounts in them. And it can be really daunting. It can be really confusing. And so just to have someone with you really is very, very helpful. And then we offer that support in building relationships. We're promoting social connection and engagement in the community. And so that can look like going to have coffee, going out to lunch, taking a walk around the neighborhood, and then connection to the larger recovery community as well, continuing to make those connections with people who are walking this similar path, who have experienced similar struggles. Next slide. So peer support as part of your team. Here are some things that I would like you to know as a person in recovery. So get to know your peer support person, know their role. I think once we have a deep understanding of like what this is, the value to it can really be seen. So be willing to see the unique perspective that a peer has on patient care. Like I said, we've moved through these systems. We know how to navigate them. And so we know when things don't necessarily jive. We really are able to see things a bit differently. The sharing of information is going to look different for a peer than it does in a traditional service relationship. So we prefer to get information about the people that we support from them directly. And so you'll hear often in the peer department spaces, nothing about us without us. And so this means that we're not offering up information about the people that we support to other people without them present. But this also, we talk about this also when we talk about systems change, that as decisions are made on a systems level, people in recovery often don't have a voice in that. And so we ask, we're trying to move towards that we have input. These systems are designed to treat us, right? And so we can lend voice to that, like how to make this better, how to make this look different. Know that keeping documentation, peers, it is very minimal. We would prefer not to do it at all, but sometimes it's necessary for a host of reasons. And conversations with our peers are confidential. And this isn't because of a HIPAA concern. Legally, we are part of the team, and so we could share information, but we don't because that holds fidelity to the model. It also protects the privacy and trust that we work very hard to establish in these relationships. And so boundaries are going to look very different too. We have a level of self-disclosure that is okay, where in some other roles it is not. So I'm able to share pieces of my story, even the heavy and hard ones. We do this mindfully though, and we make sure that it is on purpose, that it makes sense in the relationship. And so we spend a lot of time in the community too. So if you have a peer that's working in your office, maybe you don't see them very often. We are out and about. And so there's also more room for negotiation in these relationships too. And while it isn't common, it is okay for us to become Facebook friends or to take evening and weekend calls. Because these relationships are mutual and reciprocal, we talk about these things and we make sure that it makes sense. So if I'm not able to take a weekend call, I speak directly to the person that I'm supporting about that and create that boundary, and we negotiate what's going to work for both of us. And so another thing that you can do is advocate for access to peer support in spaces where it isn't available, and work to normalize the presence of a peer on your team. And so this means like if you have intake appointments, make sure that your peer is also like sent an invite for them or they're included in that. Refer patients if a peer is available to your practice. This is a really valuable and important resource for people. It's very accessible and it's very low barrier. It is a foundational support for folks that bolsters engagement in other programs and really helps them to stay on the path that they've designed for themselves. So if you have it available to you, we encourage you to utilize it. So thank you all for listening, and I think we're going to open up for